I just played through Rare's last game that they made specifically for a Nintendo home console, and after spending close to 20 hours playing it, do I think that Nintendo should remake Star Fox Adventures? No. No, it should not. At least not an exact remake of the GameCube version. So sit back and let us explain.
We are Soulless Gaming, 5 brothers who have spent the past 30 years playing video games. As part of our channel, we use our over 130 combined years of video gaming experience to discuss what made some of our past favorite games great and why we are playing the games we are today.
There's some things in life that just go together perfectly. You got peanut butter and jelly, butter and toast, gaming and Doritos, 90s throwback videos tied to this song, and the combination of Rare and Nintendo. During the span of 1986 to 2003, Rare, or commonly known as Rareware back then, developed some of the most iconic video games of all time. Starting on the Nintendo Versus system all the way to the Nintendo GameCube, they were considered a second-party studio with Nintendo. They were responsible for the Donkey Kong Country games, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, GoldenEye 007, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Jet Force Gemini, Battletoads, and the Killer Instinct franchise, just to name a few. In 1997, Rare started development on a game called Dinosaur Planet. This was slated for release sometime around 2000 on the Nintendo 64, and the game was supposed to feature 2 protagonists, Saber, a male fox, and then Crystal, a female fox, who through their interwoven storylines would save their planet. During development, however, Shigeru Miyamoto at Nintendo saw the similarities between Saber and Fox McCloud and suggested that Dinosaur Planet be merged into a Star Fox game. Doing this would hopefully boost awareness of the game and lead to more sales. Rare agreed, and the years of work spent on Dinosaur Planet were migrated over to the world of Star Fox. Aww. What's cool is that bits and pieces of this unreleased game have actually leaked over the years, and even as recent as 2021, a development version of the game that was dated December 2000 was purchased by the video game preservation group Forest of Illusion. They purchased it from a private game collector from Sweden. The group uploaded this ROM online where it is still downloadable and playable right now. The game features a ton of assets that were altered slightly for the final GameCube release, but some cutscenes even made it into the final build and are one-for-one replicas of the original N64 game. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in watching a full walkthrough of the game. Now, it doesn't play perfectly and there's a lot of glitches and missing content, but what they've been able to do with this ROM is amazing, and if you've ever wanted to check out an unreleased game before, this is a good one to start with. Following the developmental shift from Dinosaur Planet to Star Fox Adventures, Miyamoto and the team at Nintendo recommended releasing the game for the GameCube rather than the N64 to utilize its new power. Rare agreed to do this as well, and the game was adapted for the newer console. It was finally released on September 23, 2002 in North America, and then 5 days later in Japan. The game currently holds an 82 on Metacritic, where critics generally praised the graphics, but felt like the gameplay was lacking, which we'll get into more later.
When Nintendo was preparing for the September 2002 launch, stores like Target, Toys R Us, and Walmart all had demos of the game that you could play. We older boys remember playing it while our mom shopped, and it is probably the main reason we ended up getting it 2 months after launch.
At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I don't think that Nintendo should remake the game, and even after praising it for the past several minutes about how nostalgic the game is and how much fun I had playing it 20 years ago, I did not have the same amount of fun this time around. After the release of the rail shooter Star Fox 64 that became the 9th best-selling game on the N64, Nintendo was ready to follow up its success with Star Fox Adventures. Players loved the branching paths of Star Fox 64 that offered hours upon hours of replayability. The difficulty of saving some of your squad mates, plus a few unforgiving levels, encouraged players to hone their abilities and continue playing even after the first credits rolled. It was a difficult game, but it rewarded you for keeping your squad alive, with different branching paths and alternate endings. To say that people were excited for a follow-up of that hit game would have been an understatement, and it makes sense why Nintendo would want to build on the Star Fox brand instead of creating a new Fox protagonist with Dinosaur Planet. People had to think that this was the game that they were going to be getting.
All ships, avoid the Armada's fire. Aim for Oikone's flagship.
Here we go! Hey, Slippy, don't get cocky.
What I'm showing you right now is Star Fox Assault, which is not the game that we got in 2002. This is Star Fox Adventures.
What? You to one of those warpstone thingies. We'll get back to that in a minute. And if you push forward on the control stick, then you can enter the maze. Right!
The game starts you out not as Fox, but as Crystal. That's the same Crystal that was originally going to be the protagonist of Dinosaur Planet. It starts you out on the back of a pterodactyl that shoots blue orbs out of its mouth versus a giant floating dinosaur ship that shoots fire at you. Now that's not a phrase I'd ever thought I'd be talking about in a Star Fox game, but we'll just roll with it.
Do a barrel roll.
After breaking the ship down enough, you board it to find a stolen baby pterodactyl that teaches you how to press A, and then you grab a key to
Krazoa Palace!
Once you go up to the top of the ship again, you're introduced to General Scales, who must control the planet with fear and then throws you off of his ship. You're saved by your friend, who then takes you to
Krazoa Palace!
where after throwing some exploding barrels and avoiding some spinning jellyfish, you learn that the King Earthwalker sent his troops to protect the palace from General Scales, but they failed and were slaughtered. In a last-ditch effort, they released the 6 Krazoa spirits across the planet so General Scales won't collect them. You gather one of these, and after a short and easy trial of wits, you then take that spirit to the palace to be released. However, while it's being released, you're trapped in a giant purple crystal by an unknown figure.
Oh, okay. I see what you did there.
The story now switches to the Star Fox team, minus Falco, who receives a new mission from General Pepper.
General Pepper here! Your mission takes place on Thorntail Hollow.
What the dog doing?
The queen of the Earthwalker tribe. Pepper out!
Once you've flown through one gold ring to reach Dinosaur Planet, General Pepper gives you a tutorial on how to use the GameCube controller. Just a quick little side note here, while I'm editing, I hate it when games do this. I think it completely pulls you out of the experience of being Fox McCloud, and instead now you're just some random person playing a video game. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and having a character say things like,
And then press the A button to contact one of us.
is not an immersive way to play the game. I love how General Pepper has to remind Fox that he's not just going to go there to blow the planet up, as if Fox is Samus or something. After talking with the locals for a little bit, Fox discovers Crystal's staff has conveniently landed between palm trees and some beautiful flowers. He picks it up, gives it a couple of twirls, and then is ambushed by a group of sharp claws. This is where you get your first taste of the combat that we'll be experiencing for the next roughly 15 to 20 hours of gameplay. And this is also where my first gripe of the game comes in. Although the moves Fox does with the staff are cool to watch, you really only have 3 combos that actually do any damage, and they all depend on which direction you point the control stick. By holding forward, Fox does a few jabs with the staff and then jumps up to do a stronger hit. By holding to the left or right, he does a small kicking combo. Then holding backwards, he does the coolest looking move where Fox spins the staff to his left and right, then charges it up to do a good amount of damage. Even though these 3 different combos look pretty flashy, the third one takes way too long to do, and most of the time, the last hit of the combo gets blocked, so you're really only left with 2 combos for the whole game. Nowadays, people will complain that there's only 27 spells in Hogwarts Legacy. There were a few times I tried to mix up the combos with jumps, dodges, rolls, and using staff abilities, but I ultimately found the easiest and most consistent way to defeat enemies was to do either the front or side combos. The staff abilities like the Fire Blaster, Ice Blaster, and Ground Quake are fun to use, and they're actually pretty powerful, but I usually found myself running out of magic meter for puzzles if I relied on these too much during combat. After picking up the Fire Blaster upgrade for Crystal's staff, you encounter the Queen of the Earthwalkers, who's practically on her deathbed. She informs you that you need to go and save her son, Tricky, who apparently Fox thinks has a funny name.
To rescue her son, the Prince Tricky.
Nice name.
After the interaction with the Queen, you start to hear something. The music in the Star Fox games has always been impressive. From the first Corneria level in the original Star Fox and the SNES, to each level in Super Smash Bros., to Star Fox 64 and beyond. The music does a great job at matching the surrounding area in pretty much every Star Fox game, and this is actually no exception. From here, you travel to Ice Mountain via the very Scottish Warpstone.
Nobody ever brings me gifts anymore!
You travel to Ice Mountain where you meet Tricky. He is promptly smacked by a sharp claw, and after a quick race down the mountain that I totally completed on my first try, you fall down the extremely long cliff At this point in the game, it becomes part Nintendogs with how much you have to care for Tricky, and part Legend of Zelda with the dungeons and puzzles that you have to do, with a little tiny bit of Star Fox mixed in there. And at this point, you basically follow this plan throughout the rest of the game. You first have to help someone in need, who will then open up a warp point so that you can fly to the next dungeon. Once you do that, you complete the dungeon, or defeat the boss, or whatever it is you have to do, and you get a spell stone. These spell stones are used to bring the planet back together. Once you have the spell stone, you have to take it to the corresponding temple, whether it's the volcano or the ocean force point temple. And while you're doing this, you have to gather 5 additional Krazoa spirits on top of the one that Crystal collected at the beginning. And once you've collected the Krazoa spirits, you deliver them to
Krazoa Palace!
In total, there's 4 spell stones and 5 Krazoa spirits that Fox has to collect. While doing those general things, you basically solve puzzles, collect scarabs, which is the money, and you get to hear Tricky complain about how hungry he is.
Wait for me!
Stay.
I'm hungry. I'm stuffed. Anybody there? Fox! I lost you in the blizzard! Look at this!
Once you've saved Tricky, you then have to save the snow horns at Dark Ice Mines, and you get the first fire spell stone from the boss Galdon. This boss was so iconic for me as a kid, and it felt so cool to beat him because he was so big and he looked so tough. Once you've done some basic platforming puzzles, you can deliver this spellstone to the Volcano Force Point Temple to get one step closer to bringing the planet back together. On your way out of the temple, you encounter a Krazoa god who tells you about Crystal, and that the only way to solve her is by gathering the 5 additional missing Krazoa spirits. You then make your way through Moon Mountain Pass to get your first Krazoa spirit as Fox, and you travel to
Krazoa Palace!
Using our friendly neighborhood warp stone. As you're delivering the spirit, groovy saxophone music plays and you fall in love with Crystal.
She's beautiful.
With your new determination to save Crystal, you travel back to Thorntail Hollow to Cape Claw,
60 scarabs to enter Cape Claw!
which is where you gain access to the Cloudrunner Fortress. You first have to save the Queen of the Cloudrunners, who's the gatekeeper, and then you travel back to Thorntail Hollow and enter your R-Wing.
To open the gatekeeper's force field!
You have a quick encounter with General Scales, whose machines knock you out, and he throws you into their prison. After breaking out of prison, you become an expert at the clarinet and beat 2 Sharpclaws in a race for the first water spellstone. After delivering this spellstone to the Ocean Force Point Temple, in Cape Claw, you are captured by the Lightfoot Village, a small settlement of raptor-esque dinosaurs who live in a place that looks like the swamp in Jet Force Gemini. The Lightfoot Village forces you to play arcade games like Brick Stacker, a pattern matching game, and then break your A button sim in order to survive. You also do a variation of the Stardew Valley fishing minigame in order to get your second Krazoa spirit. After dropping your Krazoa spirit at
Krazoa Palace!
you travel to the walled city, which is where you meet Tricky's dad. In the city, you can blow up T-Rexes who are terrorizing the locals with your new Groundquake ability. You then fight an awesome gigantic T-Rex by tossing bombs onto its face to collect your second fire spellstone. After this, you travel back to the Volcano Force Point Temple to deliver the final fire spellstone. At this point, you're tasked to collect all the scarabs in Thorntail Hollow, to then spend your life savings on a golden relic at the store, aka a sacred relic of the Snowhorns that the shopkeeper stole. Then you collect and drop off the third Krazoa spirit, which you gained by gently tapping A on your controller. After dropping it off, you speak to a Thorntail who's suffering from PTSD and is the gatekeeper for Dragon Rock, or as I like to call it, the first-person shooter petting zoo.
Are you ready? Let's go!
I'll fly you in close, but you'll have to protect me from their fire.
Your pterodactyl friend cautions you to be careful as you jump down a several 100-foot drop to fight the boss, called Drakor, where you just press A bunch. No need to worry about your magic meter. Once Drakor is defeated, you return the last spellstone to the Ocean Force Point Temple to bring the planet back together again. But nothing happens. You return back to Thorntail Hollow, where Tricky's mom says that the spellstones isn't enough. You also need to get all of the Krazoa spirits. She tells you to head to the walled city, where you do some Pokemon Ice Cave puzzles in order to get the 4th Krazoa spirit. You then leave Tricky with his dad because of reasons, and return the Krazoa spirit to
Krazoa Palace!
Once you deliver that final Krazoa spirit, a new place opens up on top of Krazoa Palace, which is where you fight General Scales to get the last Krazoa spirit. Keep in mind, General Scales is the orchestrator of the entire plot, who's killed hundreds, maybe even thousands in his conquest of Dinosaur Planet. You go in expecting the most epic battle of the entire game. After a cool introduction before the fight,
Now you must face me.
generic battle music plays, and the battle is stopped after you press A once, by a random voice from above telling General Scales to relinquish his Krazoa spirit. Instead of fighting against the voice and refusing, General Scales just gives in and releases his Krazoa spirit, letting out the same roar as Galden did at the beginning of the game.
You will regret this.
And that's it. You beat General Scales. When you return back to the palace, you release that final spirit, which is used to revive
Andros!
who is the main villain of the other Star Fox games. This honestly feels kind of weird and it came out of nowhere, and even though I already played through this game before and I knew it was coming, I still didn't see any indication that it was going to be Andros, or that the Krazoa spirits could even do something like this until this point in the game. The ensuing final battle of the game takes place in your R-Wing. You have to shoot the hands or the eyes of Andros to reveal his brain, which is where you actually damage him. A few minutes into the battle, Falco, the missing Star Fox team member at the beginning of the game, makes a surprise appearance and gives you bombs that you can use. At this point, the fight gets pretty easy and you just have to read what attacks he's going to be doing, and you can usually beat him pretty quick. What really frustrated me about this battle though is that although it is a Star Fox game, up to this point you've maybe spent like 2% of your total playtime in the R-Wing, and most of that is just going in a straight line to gather gold rings. You never really had to kill anything besides optional mines and small enemies. To put this into perspective, that would be like if in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time you were required to face Ganondorf in a fishing competition because there happens to be a fishing minigame. I wish they could have incorporated the staff into an epic battle with General Scales and then used the R-Wing to fight Andros. That would have given the staff and General Scales an appropriate send-off. Following the final battle and Andros exploding into a million pieces, the Krazoa spirits are able to bring the planet back together again, and everybody lives happily ever after. The Star Fox team gets to celebrate their victory, they get paid, and then Fox lore vomits on you as to why Andros needed the Krazoa spirits in the first place.
It seems that Andros discovered the ancient power of the Krazoa, and by trapping Crystal, who had the ability to channel this power, he was able to use this energy to revive himself.
The original Dinosaur Planet game expounds on this a little bit more, but in this game, you don't really ever see that, and no one ever really tells you this either. You then get a call from Crystal saying that she wants to thank Fox personally for saving her life, and she comes on board and randomly joins the team. I guess the only requirement to be a member of Star Fox is to be a cute blue fox. With the addition of Crystal on the team, it looks like they're probably going to need to clean up a few of the posters inside the Great Fox. The first half of the game seemed very fleshed out, and full of fun puzzles, new environments, and lots of new enemies. Some enemies were more annoying than others. I can tell that a lot of these fleshed out puzzles though were meant to be for Dinosaur Planet, and they were probably able to migrate them easily over to Star Fox Adventures. Some of my favorites are when you had to use the big turrets to open hidden doors, or attack enemies far away. I also really enjoyed using the staff power to disguise myself as a Sharpclaw. There could have been so many opportunities to not only add additional puzzles through this ability later in the game, but I wish we could have fought using our claws or something like that to give additional options for combat. When you're a Sharpclaw, you basically can just lift heavier things and can stand on special platforms. Towards the end of the game, the puzzles start to repeat themselves, and most of the dungeons consists of 1 to 5 barrel explosion puzzles, a few time trials or puzzles like that, and then the occasional block in the road that requires you to defeat a specific number of enemies. All of these were pretty cool at first, but it almost seemed like Rare ran out of ideas as the game progressed. Also, the final boss in the Dark Ice Mines makes it seem like each dungeon is going to have something similar, but that's not the case. For example, in order to get the water spellstone from the second dungeon, you just raise some Sharpclaws and then they just randomly give it to you. The third dungeon seems is pretty cool because you fight a gigantic T-Rex, but you just use explosive barrels to damage him. No staff is used at all. Then the fourth boss, Drakor, the boss of Dragon Rock, was supposed to play a huge role in Dinosaur Planet, and he was basically the one pulling the strings. He even had several spoken lines that made it into the December 2000 build that we mentioned earlier.
I can taste your fear, animal. It is very sweet. Do not believe everything the Krazoa have told you. We Chimerians did not start the Great War, but now it is time to end it.
However, in Star Fox Adventures, he's seen on screen for maybe 5 minutes and doesn't have any spoken lines, and you fight him just by pressing A as fast as you can. It's a huge waste of a great character after seeing how menacing and scary he was in the original game. The same goes for General Scales. You spend over a dozen hours practicing with the staff, learning new skills, preparing for an epic fight. With the person you saw as Crystal during the first 10 minutes of the game, the one person who you thought controls the entire Sharpclaw army, just to have the battle end without even hitting him, it was one of the most anticlimactic ways to send off your main antagonist that you've had the entire game. If you're going to have the real main antagonist of your game be someone else, at least give the puppet a proper send-off. Zelda games are great at this. Whether it's Zant in Twilight Princess or Girahim in Skyward Sword, you look forward to teaching those guys a lesson for messing with you. I wish they would have been able to give General Scales a proper send-off. He was such a great villain. There's even a few times where he throws sharp claws at you and he just seems so evil and menacing. In the original Dinosaur Planet, he had a pretty brutal death where he breaks his spine after a big fall and a battle with Crystal. Now, if Nintendo or even if Rare wanted to remaster Star Fox Adventures or recreate the original Dinosaur Planet, which I honestly don't think either of those will happen, this is what I would recommend them doing. First of all, do what Disney has done with Cars 2. To Disney, and even in the Cars universe, Cars 2 basically doesn't even exist. No one talks about it, no one brought it up in Cars 3, and they could do the same thing with Star Fox Adventures, just act like it didn't even happen. Second, make Crystal the main character. This is what they were going to do in Dinosaur Planet anyway, and they were going to have Saber be a protagonist as well, and they would kind of switch off between their stories. But I think it would just be simple enough to make Crystal the main character and basically have her follow the same path that Fox did in Star Fox Adventures. Have her save a relative who's the spiritual leader and is trapped similar to how she was in Star Fox Adventures. In Dinosaur Planet, it was supposed to be her adoptive father who was a wizard or something. That'll work just fine. Fourth, I've played a lot of games without fast travel, and it works just fine. Honestly, in Breath of the Wild or Red Dead Redemption, I just prefer running around or hopping on my horse most of the time. But I wish for this game they would add fast travel between locations. There's just a lot of filler spent backtracking, and games like Metroid and Hollow Knight do a really good job with backtracking because 9 times out of 10 you can find an upgrade each time you have to backtrack. That's not the case here. It would just be really helpful to have the option to fast travel if you wanted to. It would be great if they could make the staff combat more fulfilling and satisfying instead of just 3 basic combos. In Dinosaur Planet, Saber wielded a sword and Crystal had the staff that made it into Star Fox Adventures. Doing something like that and having 2 different weapon options would definitely make the game feel more creative in the combat department. Sixth, give each dungeon a proper boss that utilizes the power from that dungeon. This one's pretty simple, just give each dungeon a proper boss that utilizes the power from that dungeon. It was pretty disappointing when in the second dungeon, all you have to do is race some sharp claws to get a water spellstone. I really felt like they missed the mark there. It would have been cool to see a proper boss from that dungeon. Lastly, give General Scales a proper send-off. To have one of the main antagonists not even have a proper battle at the end was just a big letdown. Now, if they wanted to tie all of this into the Star Fox universe and to bring Crystal onto the Star Fox team, they could 100% give Fox a little cameo at the end where Saria, the name of the planet the Star Fox Adventures takes place on, pops up on his radar or something. It would be like an end credit scene like with the new Mario movie or like what Marvel likes to do. This game honestly wasn't all bad, and there were times I had a lot of fun playing it. The fact that there's practically no loading screens is really impressive for the time. Traveling from Thorntail Hollow to Cape Claw to Snowhorn Wastes and out to the Moon Mountain Pass, there are 0 loading screens. This was pretty revolutionary for the time, and games like Metroid Prime, they would basically load each zone separately. I'm sure they had little tricks where they utilized these kind of bridge zones between areas, but it really made the game feel alive, which I enjoyed. The music, like I mentioned earlier, is absolutely amazing and doesn't disappoint. It doesn't matter where you are, the music fits that locale perfectly. Even after all these years, there's still songs that I listen to from the GameCube era of Star Fox. Maybe one day Nintendo will bring back Star Fox to its roots and make a game like Star Fox 64, where you and your friends can team up and fly around a map and kill enemies in your R-Wing. Imagine an online game where each person picks a member of the Star Fox team and you have to save each other from enemies that are on your tail, just like in Star Fox Assault and Star Fox 64. Is that really too much to ask? If you liked what you heard, feel free to give our Lord of the Rings Return of the King video or our Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup video a listen. See you in the next one.
Mission complete.